to change that later. Hold on just a second. Forgot to type something in. 5, 2, 1, 6. Save. There we go. Alrighty. So we're going to be going through Job 15 and 16 tonight. And this now begins the second discourse here. So Job kind of sets it up, but now, so that we got through the first series of arguments, right? Now things are going to get worse. And I think this is where Job's friends really start to show their true colors. I mean, they already kind of have been tipping their hats, but now it just gets ridiculous here with how pointed and how twisted the things they're coming up with. And just to refresh myself, I did another read through of Job completely because, you know, every once in a while it helps to get the complete picture again when we're going through a book this slow. And so, but I was looking in the last chapter of Job, and at the very end it talks about how the things that Job's friends say, God ends up holding it against them because the things that they said were not true about God. And Job is lifted up because the things that Job said were true. And so we have to remember that Job is in mourning and he's on this emotional roller coaster, but he never once curses God. He's trying to understand what's going on with him. He thinks it's because of sin and God's treating him like an enemy, but he never once mischaracterizes God. Job's friends, on the other hand, the ones that are not going through this suffering, they use Job's suffering as an opportunity to really lift themselves up and appear wise. And time again, they're twisting God's words. They're twisting Job's words against him. And they are constantly bringing up these things that are half-truths and things like that. And God does punish them later. Okay, and so I just wanted to point that out here before we get into this, because it really starts to show in chapter 15 here with Eliphaz's second speech. And so that's where we are right now. And so Eliphaz here in chapter 15 is going to start off. Now, remember, Job was just crying out to God before this. You know, he addressed his friends and then he talks to God again. And that's kind of Job's MO throughout this. Is like whenever Job gives a response, he starts off talking to them and then he talks to God. And then Eliphaz is going to take Job's words and twist it and point them right back at him and basically say that Job currently is doing all these sinful things. Okay? And so Eliphaz here at the beginning of chapter 15 is going to bring more accusations. And I was going to list the accusations in the title here, but there's too many. So we'll get to those in a moment. So Job 15 verses 1 to 6. Here's the accusations that come here. And Job's friends, you'll notice, they always pass off their accusations very kind of passive aggressively, where they're not saying, Job, you're doing this. They'll be like, well, you know, should wise men do this? Should, you know, and so what the implication there is that they're saying Job is a fool, right? Or, should honest people do this? But they're talking to Job, so the implication would be that Job's not honest, right? And so things like that. And so this is exactly what Eliphaz does here. It says here, then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, should a wise man answer with empty knowledge? So, Job, if you're a wise man, why are you saying empty knowledge? You're a fool, right? And it says, and fill himself with the east wind. And so basically what Eliphaz is saying, Job, you're full of hot air. Like this is... That's it. You filled up your lungs. You're just spouting off these words that don't mean anything. And so he's accusing Job of folly here, of being a fool. Okay. Then it says, should he reason with unprofitable talk? So not only is Job being a fool here, but the speech that he's using is unprofitable. It means that Job is basically saying words that are making the situation worse rather than making it better. Then it says here, or by speeches which he can do no good. And so the same thing with the unprofitable talk there. And then he says, yes, you cast off fear. So Job, you don't fear God is what he's saying here. Not like, oh, I'm not afraid. No, he's saying like you're not fearing God. Then he says, and restrain prayer before God. And so Job, you should be restraining your tongue before God. And so Job, you're not allowed to mourn and bring these things to God. You should be quiet, okay? Because the things you're saying are foolish. Not only are the things you're saying are foolish, and you shouldn't be saying them before God, but they are full of sin here. So in verse 5 it says, for your iniquity teaches your mouth. So the only reason why Job is saying the things that he's saying is because his sin is in control of his mouth. This is what Eliphaz is saying. And then it says, and you choose the tongue of the crafty. So Job is not only a fool, he's not only full of sin, but he's also a liar. His mouth, he's using crafty words. He's trying to still appear godly, is what they're thinking, but is in reality not. He's committing sin. And then verse 6, your own mouth condemns you, not I. Yes, your own lips testify against you. And so this sets up what Eliphaz is now going to do. He's saying the things you've said, Job, and now Eliphaz is going to use the things that Job has said, but take them out of context and really direct them in a different direction to use it against Job here. And so that's what the next part of this passage is in verses 7 to 13. Eliphaz twists Job's words around. So the stuff that Eliphaz is saying here is actually stuff that Job has said things similar to, but with a very different direction. And we'll get to this here. So remember how Job was talking about how infinite God is? How God will outlast the mountains and all of this stuff, right? Well, Eliphaz is going to twist that and say, Job is talking about himself, that he's going to last a long time. And so this is what he's saying here. Are you the first man who was born? Or were you made before the hills? So you notice the similarities between that and what Job had said previously? But he's twisting this now. Have you heard the counsel of God? Do you limit wisdom to yourself? So Job, what Eliphaz is saying is that Job is not listening to God. Instead, he's listening to his own wisdom. And so that Job's wisdom doesn't come from God. It's not godly wisdom. That this is carnal wisdom that Job is espousing, that Job is saying here. And so that this is what Eliphaz is saying. That says, what do you know that we do not know? So remember how we started off, and Eliphaz first called Job, this teacher, like, oh, you were the teacher and all of this stuff. That was right at the beginning. And the implication throughout this is that Job used to be the one to teach them and teach them about God, right? But now, remember previously, one of the things that Job had been saying is, I am not beneath you, right? I'm not, and he says it twice in the last passage that we went through. But now Eliphaz, probably taking offense to that, is saying, what do you know that we don't know? So we're younger than you, and we've been talking about wisdom, and basically this is an argument, I'm wiser than you. No, I'm wiser than you. And so this is what Eliphaz is doing. What do you understand that is not in us? And so again, they know just as much as Job. Then it says, both the gray-haired and the aged are among us, much older than your father. And so other wise men. And so this is, Eliphaz is starting to tip his hat as to where he is getting his wisdom from. Okay, so Eliphaz is getting his wisdom from their fathers, right? From old teachings is what he's saying. This is an important thing because it's not just godly things that are being passed down. This is tradition and things like that that are being passed down. And so Eliphaz is saying, These old people are still among us, and we're listening to them, right? And you're not. And so he says here, are the consolations of God too small for you, and the word spoken gently with you? This is interesting here. So you think about consolations of God. Is God taking care of you too small for you? What Eliphaz is actually saying here is that the suffering that Job is going through is not enough to make Job realize his sin. That's what he's saying. So he basically saying God is dealing too gently with you if Job is hanging on to righteousness. And so then he continues here. Why does your heart carry you away? And why do your eyes wink at? What do your eyes wink at? That you turn your spirit against God and let such words go out of your mouth. You know, what's amazing about this is Job ended that previous argument talking about how great God still is, right? And how much faith he still has in God. But Eliphaz has completely skipped over that and basically said Job is turned against God. Job's whole thing is, why is God regarding me as an enemy? He wants to know that. And that's what he believes, is because of all of the suffering. He thinks that God has seen some sin in him and wants to punish him for it, right? And he's like, why is this happening? Instead, Eliphaz is saying, why have you turned against God, and why are you doing these things against God? And so Eliphaz is, not being a good friend here, to say the least. And so now, not only does Eliphaz twist Job's words, but he also misuses the truth. And so these next couple of verses, you remember how Job would talk about his personal suffering, and then he would talk about the suffering of man, right? So they would go back and forth between them personally and everyone in general. Well, Eliphaz just did that. So he's pointed out Job. Now he is going to use a general truth. He's still using it against Job here, but this is a general truth, right? Verse 14 to 16. It says here, what is man that he could be pure? So can anyone be pure? Or do we have any righteousness of our own? No, right? And so what is man that he could be pure? This is a true statement. And he, who is born of a woman, that he could be righteous. So no man alive, no person alive can be righteous before God. So he's like, so Job, your folly, right? Your person will say, oh, you think you're righteous? Well, no one's righteous. And he's saying that to shut up Job, right? Then it says, if God puts no trust in his saints, now this is not talking about saved individuals here. And when I was studying this, this is again, this is a poetic book. This is talking about the angels here. So this is a little bit different because it's talking about things in heaven. Okay, so the heavenly beings. It says, in the heavens are not pure in his sight. And then it says, how much less man who is abominable and filthy. So if God doesn't put trust in them, how much less are we, right? Then it says, who drinks iniquity like water. And so Eliphaz is speaking the truth here. Man is full of sin. That is a true statement. But he's using this to support his argument of Job doing some especially bad sin, which that doesn't work. That would be like if I was arguing with Brother Junior, right? And Brother Junior did something to hurt me, right? And I was saying, or I'm accusing Brother Junior of hurting me. You'd say he didn't really do it, right? But when Junior's saying, I didn't do that, I didn't hurt you, I'd be like, well, everybody is full of sin. Now, you can't argue with that, but obviously that doesn't make the point that he did something to me, right? And so this is what Eliphaz is doing, right? Is instead of pointing out what Job did, he's saying, well, everybody does bad things. which is true, but you can't support your argument with that. And so now, not only does he misuse the truth here, but now he's going to full on twist things. He's going to twist all kinds of half truths and stuff. And the purpose of this, the purpose of Eliphaz's argument, is not actually to correct Job. It comes across pretty clear here that Eliphaz's true purpose is to raise himself above Job, so to show his superiority over Job. And that's true with really all of his friends. It becomes more and more apparent. The evidence here of Eliphaz's true purpose is right in the first line of verse 17. I will tell you, hear me. What I have seen, I will declare. This is the same one that it claimed that his wisdom came to him in a vision from God prior, right? So he's trying to use Job's suffering, Job's current state. Instead of trying to help Job, he's trying to lift himself up over Job. And then he says here, I will tell you what I've seen, I will declare. What wise men have told, right? So remember what he talks about the fathers that are still old, that are old and still with them. Well, he's talking about tradition here. What wise men have told, not hiding anything received from their fathers, to whom alone the land was given, and no alien passed among. We're going to be reading a lot of this passage here because this is the gist of all of it. There's not much to break down here, so just bear with me. And no alien passed among them. The wicked man writhes in pain all his days, and the number of years is hidden from the oppressor. Dreadful sounds are in his ears. In prosperity, the destroyer comes upon him. He does not believe that he will return from darkness, for a sword is waiting for him. He wanders about for bread, saying, where is it? He knows that a day of darkness is ready at his hand. So he's talking about all these bad things, right? And he's really pointing this at Job. Job is like these fools that have wandered around. Then it says, troubled and anguish make him afraid. They overpower him like a king ready for battle. For he stretches out his hand against God. Again, the accusation that Job is against God here. Stretches out his hand against God and acts defiantly against the Almighty. So, again, Eliphaz sees Job as being defiant and stubborn here, and acting against God. It says, running stubbornly against him with his strong embossed shield, though he has covered his face with his fatness and made his waist heavy with fat. He dwells in desolate cities, in houses which no one inhabits, which are destined to become ruins. Do you remember Job talking about the rich princes and the kings, talking about their, everything that they built coming to ruins? Eliphaz is still learning from Job, really, and repeating these things and using Job's words against him, right? Then it says, he will not be rich, nor will his wealth continue, nor will his possessions overspread the earth. And then he continues here. He will not depart from darkness. The flame will dry out his branches, and by the breath of his mouth he will go away. Let him not trust in few. So imagine, when we were watching the Matthew movie, right? When all the Pharisees walking around and they spoke in this very pious way, like they are better than everyone else. This is like that should be the image that you have of Eliphaz here. Especially, so he says, let him not trust in futile things, deceiving himself, for futility will be his reward. So he's trying to sound smart and above Job here. Then he says, it will be accomplished before his time, and his branch will not be green. He will shake off his unripe grape like a vine, and cast off his blossom like an olive tree. For the company of hypocrites will be barren. and fire will consume the tents of bribery. They conceive trouble and bring forth futility. Their womb prepares deceit. And so it's kind of interesting. If you listen to that whole kind of prose that he says, that whole speech, it kind of sounds like Proverbs, doesn't it? Almost. It sounds like that's the way he wants to sound. Right? He wants to sound like this wise man over Job. Now, all of these things are based on half-truths and maybe even truths taken out of context, right? They're not necessarily wrong, but the way he's using them against Job is wrong. And so then we see Job's response to Eliphaz. And this is probably one of the best responses that Job has. And when Job rebukes Eliphaz here, or he really kind of rebukes all of his friends in this, but it's really directed at Eliphaz, he is going to point out that his friends really should have come alongside him and prayed with him to God for deliverance. Instead, what his friends are doing, instead of coming alongside him and praying to God for his behalf, what are they doing? They're coming. They came alongside him. And then as soon as they started talking, they start putting him down and saying it's your fault, right? And so verses 1-5 here, Job rebukes them. He starts off, and it says here, "Then Job answered and said, I have heard many such things." So I've heard this stuff before, right? Some of which Job has said, right? And then it says, "Miserable comforters are you all," right? The only thing that Job wanted from his friends, he wasn't asking money from them. He wasn't asking anything from them. The only thing that he wanted from his friends was for them to come alongside him and just to be with him, to comfort him. And instead, they are these miserable comforters. Then it says, "Shall words of wind have an end?" Are you guys ever going to be quiet? Then it says here, "Or what provokes you what provokes you that you answer?" So Job has only been answering them shortly, and then he talks to God again. He's not asking for answers from them. He's not asking for advice. So he's saying, why are you doing this? Right? And then it says, "I also could speak as you do." So Job, if he wanted to, he could do this to them. Notice this. "If your soul were in my soul's place," and this is such good advice of what we really should and shouldn't be doing when we're comforting people. If your soul were in my soul's place, I could heap up words against you and shake my head at you. So he could do that, right? So if they were suffering as he was, he could easily just heap up words against them. He could just easily say mean things to them. But instead, what would Job do? He says this in verse 5. "But I would strengthen you with my mouth, and the comfort of my lips would relieve your grief." Right? And so when we come alongside our friends, when our friends are suffering, obviously it's not right to go, "This is only happening to you because you're terrible." Right? No. We should be coming alongside each other to what? Strengthen each other in hard times, right? And so now Job is going to point out that he now believes that his friends are part of God's wrath against him. So instead of them coming alongside to comfort him, he thinks now that this is part of God attacking him. So instead of, he's saying to his friends, instead of you coming alongside me and helping me, you're part of the problem, right? And so, at verse 6 here in Job 16, it says, "Though I speak, my grief is not relieved. And if I remain silent, how am I eased?" So if I talk, it doesn't help. If I stay quiet, it doesn't help. Then it says, "But now he has worn me out." The he there is God. So Job thinks, again, God is directing his wrath upon him, and he doesn't know why. It says, "You have made desolate all my company. So all of his servants and everything have been killed. Then it says, you have shriveled me up, talking about his body, and it is a witness against me. My leanness, right? So we have to remember that in the Hebrew culture, suffering, they thought, was evidence of your sin. Okay? And so this is where Job is coming from here. So when he says like his leanness, so his body being shriveled up and everything, all of that is now that literally his suffering is what is bearing witness against him, not his sin. And so people are thinking that he's a sinner because he's suffering instead of he's suffering because of his sin. He's saying this is to the extreme, right? And so this is pretty sad here, obviously. So my leanness rises up against me, bears witness to my face. He tears me in his wrath and hates me. What a place to be in where you believe that God hates you. Okay. He gnashes at me with his teeth. My adversary sharpens his gaze on me. They gape at me. So the they now is his friends. So he believes God is against him and is attacking him. Now it's the friends here. They gape at me with their mouth. They strike me reproachfully on the cheek. They gather together against me. So all of his friends, right, these three friends, have gathered together against him and they're striking him. He believes this is part of God's wrath against him. It continues here in verse 11. God has delivered me to the ungodly. Okay, so his friends being the wicked and the ungodly. And turned me over to the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, but he has shattered me. He also has taken me by my neck and shaken me to pieces. He has set me up for his target. So think about an archery target here. Then it says, his archers surround me. Who are his archers here in Job's view? His friends, right? And so his friends, not only was he suffering before, but now his friends are the ones firing the arrows. Then it says, he pierces my heart and does not pity. He pours out my gall on the ground. He breaks me with wound upon wound. He runs at me like a warrior. And so Job, again, he's now pointing out his friends are part of this issue. His friends are the ones that are hurting him now, right? And so now in the next couple of verses are kind of a transition to the next passage. Job is mourning. And so Job has to, we've seen this throughout. He takes a little bit of a chance to every once in a while to complain, right? And to mourn. And so he says here, and this is a typical thing of mourning, in verse 15, I have sewn sackcloth over my skin. So they put on, one of the things that they were mourning, they would rend their clothes and then they put on sackcloth and ashes. So sackcloth would be like this, very itchy fabric that they would wear. So purposefully to make themselves uncomfortable so that they could mourn. Then it says, and laid my head in the dust. My face is flushed from weeping, and on my eyelids is the shadow of death. Although no violence is in my hands, and my prayer is pure. And so Job still clinging to the fact that he hasn't done any specific sin against God, and that and he is mourning over this. Okay, so Job clings to his own righteousness here. Then this is a pretty awesome part of this. This is still, sad in Job's view, but us being able to look back, we know what a lot of this means. Job is now going to plead with God for an advocate. So remember, he wanted his friends to come alongside him and comfort him, right? And what his friends should be doing is offering up prayers to the Lord for Job's suffering to end. This is what I would hope for many of you if I was suffering, and what we do for each other when we ask for prayer requests every time, right? We want people to pray for us. This is helpful, right? His friends didn't do that. His friends instead, can you imagine if someone stood up and asked for prayer requests in here and we're like, Well, that's because you're a sinner. Instead of praying for them, can you imagine doing that? And so this is what Job is going to point out. But it's pretty interesting here. Job is not just talking about needing some friends to come alongside him and pray for him. He needs an advocate before the Father. And so instead of all of his sins bearing witness against him before the Father, Job needs an advocate before the Father. We all need an advocate before the Father. And thankfully, Jesus has come and is that advocate. So I got ahead of myself there. But verse 18 here, it says, O earth, do not cover my blood, and let my cry have no resting place. Surely even now my witness is in heaven, and my evidence is on high. My friends scorn me. My eyes pour out tears to God. Oh, now notice this. Oh, that one might plead for a man with God. Okay, so he needs one to plead for a man with God. This is what Jesus does for us, right? He is our advocate in heaven. And then it says, as a man pleads for his neighbor. And then verse 22, for when a few years are finished, I shall go the way of no return. And so eventually Job is going to die. He needs someone to plead for him or advocate for him before the Father, right? And so even all this, even back in the earliest book written of the Old Testament, they were looking forward to a Savior, right? And this is a pretty awesome thing. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. All right. Are there any